When a little girl looked up with teary eyes and whispered, "Mommy, I miss Daddy," her single father smiled softly and said words that would melt the world's heart, "You have won tonight." But what he did after that changed not only his daughter's life, but his own forever. The night was cold, and rain tapped gently against the small window of the modest apartment where 6-year-old Emma sat hugging her worn-out teddy bear. Her eyes were red from crying, and her voice trembled as she whispered, "Mommy, I miss Daddy." Across from her, sitting on the couch with his head buried in his hands, was a man whose eyes told a story of exhaustion and heartbreak, Daniel, a single father who had lost his wife 2 years ago in a car accident that had shattered his world and left him to raise their only daughter alone. Life had become a rhythm of survival for him: work, cook, clean, care for Emma, sleep, repeat. But no matter how much he tried, he could never fill the space that used to be brightened by his wife's laughter. Tonight, though, Emma's words pierced him deeper than usual. He looked at her, small, fragile, wrapped in her pink blanket, and for the first time in a long while, tears streamed down his face. He wished he could give her what she wanted most, her mommy, even just for one night. Daniel had never been a man of many words, but when Emma said those 6 words, something inside him broke and healed at the same time. He walked over, knelt in front of her, and placed his hand gently on her cheek. "You miss Daddy," he whispered softly, knowing she meant Mommy but understanding her innocent confusion. "You have won tonight," he said, forcing a smile, though his throat tightened with emotion. Emma blinked, confused, her tears pausing for a second. "But your Daddy," she said, tilting her head. Daniel nodded. "I know, sweetheart. But tonight, I'll be Mommy too." She stared at him, puzzled, as he took her tiny hand and said, "Come on, let's make your favorite dinner. The one Mommy used to make." And that was how, on a rainy Thursday night, a tired single father decided to become everything his daughter needed, even if just for one night. In the kitchen, Daniel tried to remember how his wife, Lily, used to make her famous heart-shaped pancakes. He could still hear her humming that old tune she loved while she cooked. He could still picture her flour-covered apron and the way she always kissed Emma's forehead before serving her plate. He smiled sadly as he fumbled with the ingredients, mixing too much milk, spilling a bit of flour on the counter, and almost burning the first batch. But when Emma giggled and said, "Daddy, Mommy never burned them like that," he laughed, a laugh that felt real after so long. "Well," he said, "Mommy was a better cook than Daddy. But tonight, I'll try to be her." And for the first time since Lily's passing, their kitchen was filled not with silence, but with laughter. The smell of pancakes mixed with the sound of giggles and tiny footsteps as Emma danced around the small space, pretending to be Mommy's helper. After dinner, Daniel found an old pink scarf in Lily's drawer, her favorite one. It still smelled faintly of her perfume. He wrapped it around his neck, trying not to let Emma see the tears forming in his eyes. When Emma came running into the room, she gasped and covered her mouth. "Mommy," she said instinctively, then stopped, realizing it was just her dad. Daniel smiled gently and said, "Close your eyes, sweetheart. Tonight, you can talk to Mommy." He knelt beside her, voice trembling as he softened his tone. "Hi baby," he said in a whisper, imitating Lily's gentle voice. Emma opened her eyes slowly, unsure whether to smile or cry. "Mommy," she said again, and Daniel nodded. "I missed you," she whispered. "I missed you too, my love," Daniel replied, his heart breaking and healing with every word. He sat there, pretending, acting, loving, until the line between reality and memory blurred. For the next hour, Daniel listened as Emma told Mommy everything, about her drawings, about her school, about how she'd been brave when she fell off the swing last week. And Daniel, still wearing that pink scarf, answered every question the way Lily would have, kind, soft, full of love. When Emma finally hugged him and whispered, "Don't go again, Mommy," he held her tightly and said, "I never really left, baby." The words came from a place deeper than he understood, a place between grief and gratitude, pain and healing. That night, when Emma finally fell asleep in his arms, Daniel sat beside her bed and looked at her tiny hand resting on his chest. The world outside was quiet, but inside him, something shifted, a realization that being both mother and father wasn't a burden, but a blessing disguised as pain. He spent the next few days doing small things Lily used to do, brushing Emma's hair in the morning, leaving a sticky note in her lunchbox with a smiley face, and reading bedtime stories in a soft voice that sounded almost like her mother's. He wasn't replacing her. He was continuing her love. And Emma, who once cried every night asking for mommy, now smiled more often. She started saying things like, "Mommy's proud of you, Daddy," or "You're both of them now." Daniel never corrected her, because maybe she was right. He was both now. One Sunday morning, as they walked past the small park near their apartment, Emma saw a little girl playing with both her parents. She stopped, watching them quietly. Daniel's heart clenched. He waited for the question, the one that always came, but this time, she simply took his hand and said, "It's okay, Daddy. I have two in one." He smiled, fighting back tears, realizing his daughter was teaching him strength he didn't know he had. That night, he wrote in his journal something he would later read hundreds of times: "Love never divides when one leaves. It multiplies in the one who stays." My dear viewers, if this story has already touched your heart even a little, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes, one story can heal someone silently going through the same pain. As days turned into weeks, Daniel's life began to slowly rebuild itself. He started smiling again, cooking more, taking Emma out for ice cream, even singing her favorite lullaby at night. But one evening, something unexpected happened that would test everything he had learned about love, loss, and kindness. Emma had brought home a drawing she made in school. It showed 3 stick figures, a small girl, her daddy, and a woman drawn with wings. Above it, she'd written in shaky letters, "Mommy watches from the sky." Daniel stared at it for a long time, his hands trembling, his chest tight. That night, when he tucked Emma into bed, she asked, "Daddy, will Mommy ever come back for real?" And Daniel, with a voice that cracked under the weight of truth, whispered, "No, sweetheart, but sometimes, love doesn't need to come back. It never leaves." But the next morning, life decided to remind him that love's greatest test isn't loss, it's what you do after it. A knock at the door changed everything. The knock echoed softly through the small apartment, startling Daniel as he wiped the kitchen counter, lost in thought. It was early morning, and the smell of coffee still hung in the air. He glanced toward the door, wondering who it could be. They rarely had visitors. When he opened it, he saw a woman standing there, drenched from the drizzle outside, holding a brown envelope close to her chest. Her face was tired but kind, her eyes the sort that carried both stories and secrets. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel nodded cautiously. "I'm sorry to bother you," she continued, "my name's Sarah. I work at the Children's Hospital downtown." Daniel frowned, unsure where this was going. Then she took a deep breath and said words that made his heart skip, "I knew your wife." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. "You knew Lily?" he whispered. Sarah nodded, her eyes misting. "We met in the hospital. I was her nurse during her last few weeks. She talked about you and your little girl every day." The air grew heavy, and Daniel felt an ache he hadn't felt in months. "She asked me to give you this," Sarah said, holding out the brown envelope. His hands trembled as he took it. She smiled softly through her tears. "She wanted me to wait until the time felt right. I think now is that time." Then, with a quiet goodbye, she turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing in the doorway clutching the envelope like it was life itself. He sat on the couch for several minutes before daring to open it. Inside, there was a letter, his wife's handwriting, the same graceful curve of letters he used to admire on sticky notes around the house. The first line shattered him completely. My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. He couldn't breathe. Tears blurred the words as he read on. I know you must be hurting. I know our little girl is missing me. But I want you to promise me something, don't let her grow up missing love. I chose you because I knew you'd give her both, mine and yours. I believe in you. I always have. And if she ever says she misses me, tell her, she has me in you. His hands shook as he reached the last page. I've asked the nurse to bring this to you only when she feels you're ready. And if today is that day, then remember, love doesn't die, it transforms. Be kind to yourself, and when she says she misses mommy, tell her, she has one tonight, and every night after. By the time he finished reading, Daniel was crying uncontrollably. The words felt like they were written yesterday, like Lily had just whispered them into his heart. He looked around the apartment, the photos, the drawings, the pink scarf still hanging on the chair, and realized she had never really left. She had simply changed form. That night, Daniel told Emma about the letter. He didn't read it all to her, just the parts he thought she would understand. She listened quietly, her small hand clutching his. Mommy wrote that? She asked, her eyes wide. Yes, he said softly, smiling through tears. And she said whenever you miss her, just look for her in the things we do together. In pancakes, bedtime stories, hugs, laughter, she's there. Emma thought for a moment and then said, then mommy's here every day. Daniel nodded, and for the first time, his heart didn't ache, it felt full. That night, when he tucked her into bed, Emma said, Daddy, you're the best mommy too. He smiled, kissed her forehead, and whispered, that's because mommy taught me how. When she drifted off to sleep, he sat beside her, holding the letter again. He realized that kindness, real kindness, isn't always about what we give to strangers, sometimes, it's about the love we give when we're completely broken ourselves. It's the kindness of staying soft in a world that's tried to harden you. A few months passed, and Daniel began volunteering at the same hospital where Lily spent her last days. He would read stories to sick children, help parents who felt lost, and sometimes, just sit quietly beside someone crying in the waiting room. One day, as he was leaving, he noticed a young single mother struggling to calm her crying child. She looked exhausted, her hair messy, her eyes swollen with tears. Without thinking, Daniel walked over, knelt beside the little boy, and made a funny face that made him giggle. The woman looked at him with a grateful smile, and he said softly, you're doing great. You're both mom and dad right now, and that's something to be proud of. The woman's eyes welled up as she whispered, thank you. I really needed to hear that. Daniel smiled gently and said, someone once told me love never leaves, it just changes who carries it. As he walked out into the fading sunlight, he felt something inside him lift, not because he had helped someone, but because Lily's kindness was still living through him. A year later, Daniel and Emma stood by a small tree they had planted in Lily's memory. It was blooming for the first time, small white flowers dancing in the wind. Emma looked up at him and said, Mommy's smiling, isn't she? He nodded. She is, sweetheart. Every time we're kind, she smiles. They stood there silently, hand in hand, watching the petals fall. For a moment, it felt like time stopped, just a father and daughter, held together by the invisible threads of love that no death, no distance, no sadness could ever break. And maybe that's what kindness really means, not just the grand gestures, but the quiet promises we keep long after the world thinks we've moved on. It's the strength to comfort someone when you're still healing, the courage to love deeper after loss, and the grace to believe that even the smallest act, a smile, a hug, a whispered, you're not alone, can change a life. As Daniel looked down at Emma, who was now placing a flower at the base of the tree, he whispered softly to himself, you have one tonight, Lily, and every night after. Because love, when born from kindness, never truly dies. It simply finds new hearts to live in. True kindness begins when love chooses to stay, even when the person who gave it is gone. When you love selflessly, your kindness becomes eternal. It lives in the people you touch, in the hearts you heal, and in the quiet moments when someone whispers, "You have won tonight."